In the 1760s and early 1770s, Great Britain begins to levy hefty taxes on American colonists in order to finance some of their wars abroad. The colonists resent these taxes and begin to push back. The resistance culminates in the Boston Tea Party in December 1773. After losing 46 tons of tea in Boston Harbor, Britain begins to punish the colonists for their insubordination.
When Great Britain began to realize that the colonies were becoming more and more disagreeable and unruly, they say, well, we're going to do something about that.
It's interesting. The British are the ones who changed the relationship between the colonies because they impose a series of taxes. That causes people on both sides of the Atlantic to reevaluate that relationship and think about who's in charge.
On June 11th, 1776, Jefferson begins writing what will become known as the Declaration of Independence.
Jefferson was definitely aware of the stakes. They were challenging a system of government. They were cutting themselves off from a great power. That is a huge risk. Anything could happen.
Well, Jefferson takes this opportunity, and boy, does he make the most of it. He writes a great document. Even though he's borrowing from Enlightenment thinkers, he's shaving words, he's tightening, he's condensing, he's synthesizing.
It drove John Adams crazy that Jefferson got so much credit for this, because there was nothing in the Declaration of Independence that had not been hackneyed around revolutionary circles for years. Absolutely true. But somebody had to describe it, somebody had to distill it, somebody had to frame it, and that's the frame that we still pursue.
On June 28, 1776, Jefferson takes his 1,500-word first draft of the Declaration of Independence back to the Committee of Five for review.
The first draft that's presented to the group would be recognizable as the Declaration we know today. He loses a climactic paragraph that's very grandiose about people parting ways and traveling down different roads.
The Committee of Five also removes a controversial paragraph criticizing slavery and holding Britain's king responsible for its spread. He has waged cruel war against human nature itself, violating its most sacred rights of life and liberty in the persons of a distant people who never offended him, captivating and carrying them into slavery in another hemisphere, or to incur miserable death in their transportation thither.
What do we make of this allegation written by a man who owned slaves, presented to a room full of people, many of whom enslaved others? The King of Great Britain was responsible for the transatlantic slave trade.
He's trying to basically wash his hands of moral responsibility for slavery by blaming the king, saying, in effect, that slavery was imposed upon us here in the colonies for your financial benefit.
What his actual thoughts were, I just can't wrap my mind around. That he does propound this universal view of what a person is and what freedom is and what something even as subjective as happiness looks like. But at the same time, can't look at, won't look at the meagerest definition, which is the definition of the word all. All men, all people.
It's an interesting thing to think of him in that house on Market Street with Robert Hemings, who is at the time 14 years old. As Jefferson is talking about all men are created equal, he's there with his wife's enslaved half-brother.
People in Congress were smart enough to take that out, realizing not only that some slaveholders actually wanted slavery, but they didn't feel it was the moral wrong. And they knew the idea that the colonists did not have any role to play in the slave trade just wouldn't hold water.
The reasons why this passage is written and then removed are some of the most contested in American history.
Look, on one hand, we can simply throw this out. We can say this is absurd, this is a rhetorical excess, frankly, it's nonsense as history, it's hypocrisy. I have a lot of sympathy with this view. However, I want to suggest a counter view. The fact that the clause on the slave trade mentions the rights of a distant people that King George III has allegedly violated suggests that the same natural rights that white British colonists in America are fighting to uphold and asserting that they have in the Declaration of Independence should indeed apply to those Africans and descendants of those Africans who they're enslaving. Even if Jefferson does not realize that is what he's saying.
I wish it had stayed in, because he refers to them as people. So there's no question when people ask, well, does he mean all men are created equal? Does it mean black people as well? Well, this passage makes clear that he is talking about people of African descent as people, and they had been treated cruelly. So I think it could have been useful later on if it had remained there.
Had the Declaration of Independence included dealing with slavery, what would the nation be? Would it have been a different nation?
Part of the tragedy of American history is that the trumpets are sounding, the troops are marching. It feels as though we're entering this new epoch in the history of the world, and yet it was so incomplete.
The fact that the core contradiction of the idea that all men are created equal and Jefferson being a slave owner and that original sin being baked in that cake gnaws at us still, but it ultimately doesn't reduce its power. It remains something that we aspire to. The Declaration of Independence is the most concise articulation of the idea of America and how we were different. We're a nation based on an idea, not a tribal identity. And that anyone who subscribes to that idea, which is revolutionary, can become a part of this country and pursue your own American dream of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. That opening paragraph, I think it's 52 words, is close to perfect.
When in the course of human events, it becomes necessary for one people to dissolve the political bands which have connected them with another, and to assume among the powers of the earth the separate and equal station to which the laws of nature and of nature's God entitle them.
He writes that we are all endowed by our Creator with certain rights, including life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness.
He says identity, the worth, the value of a person is tied not to power or station or birth. It's something that has to do with nature. That's so powerful that it keeps reconstructing the country down the line.
The wit of adding happiness always stuns me. It's not a guarantee, but you're guaranteed the pursuit of happiness, which implies freedom, it implies joy, it implies an individuated vision. It's going to be a little bit different for everybody.
And it is in part to help mobilize people by appealing to their anxieties and emotions.
He makes Americans into victims, vulnerable, susceptible, their nerves shot. It's a divorce decree. The king is an abusive husband.
There's that long kind of bill of attainder against George III. All those crimes that he has allegedly committed.
He has refused his assent to laws, the most wholesome and necessary for the public good. He has dissolved representative houses repeatedly for opposing with manly firmness his invasions on the rights of the people. He has obstructed the administration of justice.
He has. It's quite rhythmic.
These united colonies are, and of right ought to be, free and independent states, that they are absolved from all allegiance to the British Crown.
Those ideas continue to reverberate, not just through the colonies and inspiring a revolution, but centuries later, quoted by people around the world. That's catching lightning in a quill.
In some ways, the Declaration overtakes even the Constitution for emotional and spiritual primacy in the country.
It's an address to a candid world. It signals to other powers that the rebellious colonists are not going to reconcile with Britain. Our rights don't come because we're British subjects anymore. Our rights, they are natural rights. These are universal rights. We're here. We are the United States of America, and we're not going anywhere.